Glad that you're here with us on Morning Express. It's time for us to get into the newsroom, and let me go straight to introducing the panel that's going to help us discuss that. And let me start with my extreme left, where we have Patrick Gadara, who's a communications expert, also a cartoonist. Good to have you, Patrick.
Yeah, good to be here.
And I hope you had a good week.
Had a good week. It's been a while since I was back. I was on the bench.
Yes, you've been playing dodgy, but it's good that you're around. We also have Mwenda Kilemi, who is a lecturer at University of Nairobi in the communications department.
Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. You had a good week as well. I think 2 weeks since the last week.
Yes. It's been good. It's been good.
Okay. Last but not least, we have David Ohito, who is the digital editor with us here in the Standard Media Group. Good to have you too.
Thank you.
Good. Let's start with just today's headlines and your thoughts on it. All the three papers are actually carrying the same story, although worded differently. Let me start with you, David Ohito. Is that because it's a big story, or is it because of the person behind the story making news? In this case, like Aaron Ochieng was saying, once Raila is on a paper, it makes headlines.
Yes and no. Yes, because I think we've been going far too much around this ICC issue for far too long, and when Raila, I think it got to him, and being the strategic politician I have covered for the last 20 years, he knew very well he was flying out to Korea and he wanted to leave Kenya burning with his name, and so throw the bomb,
throw something,
and get into the flight and go. And that is how he has kept the government, troops and his opponents gazing and eyeing all the time. So when he will be away, you will see the difference in terms of both sales in newspapers, in terms of the dry news content for some of us who work in the news desk, and you will see there's always a trend that if you are in the government or you are in the camp that is not aligned to Raila and you want to make news, just throw a word at him and then the editors will get hooked up.
They'll spin it. All right, Gadara, your take on it in terms of Raila being a newsmaker and also the weight of the story.
Well, it is undeniable that he is a newsmaker. I'm more concerned with why he is a newsmaker. And I think all the shenanigans now around who, quote-unquote, fixed Ruto, I think is really a diversion. I think it's very much us playing into the interests and fights within the political class and thinking that those are our issues that they're dealing with. I'm a bit disappointed.
When you say we, do you mean the media?
Yes.
But you can't ignore it. I mean,
I'm not saying you can ignore it, but I think you're giving it too much weight. And I think, in a sense, the press becomes captured by the politics of things rather than the issues of it.
How would it be done differently, given that really all we've done is literally report what has been said?
But this is the thing, is, I mean, let's look at the terminology first. So it's this idea of fixing. That's there. Nobody really explains what it means. Does it mean that people are saying that witnesses have been procured, that are fake witnesses, that whether it's Moses Kuria admitting that he did this, which is a crime? In which case, if I was in the press, I'd be quickly heading up to the ODPP and asking, why aren't these guys being arrested? Why aren't these guys being investigated? Because they are admitting felonies. The second thing is, I think the wider issue here again goes back to the whole idea of post-election violence and whether anybody is culpable for it. All we seem to hear is anybody who's accused is fixed, but not really. People were killed. We lost between 1,300 and 6,000 people, depending on who you listen to, But we still don't have anybody that we can say actually perpetrated this. It all seems to be up in the air, and we're more interested in the politics of it and how the issue is used politically by the likes of Raila and Kuria and the president, etc., but not really about the substance of what went on.
But the substance of what he's saying is quite important. He's implying that these problems have been caused by somebody extremely close to the president, and what that means for the coalition is momentous. No wonder it's a front cover, so I'm not surprised that it would make news. The content of what he's saying is extremely important. Also, I think it also shows how now this issue, he has decided to frame it in a different way. Before, he was always reacting to accusations being made against him. Now he's the one who's thrown something out there, and now people are going to react to what he has said, which is important for him as well, because he's no longer reacting.
If I may ask, what is it that he has put out? You know, is he accusing the president of breaking the law?
No, he's accusing somebody close to the president.
No, yes, I mean, he's saying in his statement that Korea was working in his office, and there's no way.
He's implying that the president.
And it's the thing is, we need to put it in black and white. What he's implying is not just about fixing somebody.
Yes,
it's about breaking laws. You know, and this is what we need to focus on.
Which is why it's an important story. Which is why it needs to be.
Yeah, but look at how it's framed. It's framed really as a political issue.
So are you saying that, looking at it how it is framed, we are making it lighter than it really is?
Yes, I think we are looking, as I said, at the politics of things, not the substance of it. If it's a substance, really we should be banging down the doors of the ODPP. Naturally. Why are you not investigating these people? These allegations, these confessions, if you will call them that, by Korea, have been out in the media for a while, saying, I procured witnesses. You know, I paid them.
I think the other bigger statement Raila is making there is that even the office of DPP is such a partisan and political one, and can choose to go after some politicians who made statements at a political rally, and not people who are really involved in crimes that have attracted or have made Kenyans to appear before the International Criminal Court. Two is saying that there is a lot of political influence on this case, and he said it very clearly at one point when he offered to be a witness on Ruto's side. Every other person was saying no. Why are they turning around just after a few months saying, now tell us what you know, what difference has happened between when he said and offered evidence or volunteered to stand in as a witness? So I think the media, we either playing lightly, I agree, and just regurgitating what has been said before, and just adding a little context that just because the statement was released yesterday. But if you ask me, we should be dealing with what happened to victims, what happened to people who are uprooted from their homes, who have never returned more than 5 years later on. How do we go about healing the nation? If I had land in Sugoi or in the neighborhood, and my land, I was thrown out of my house, am I capable of going back to live there? What happens to women who were raped? What happened to families who lost members? So I think again we've been deflected into the politics and left the core issues.
Would this be a good springboard to have that conversation? Because when we look at the people who are displaced and what happened to the victims and all those who lost their loved ones, it's a story that we've already followed up for a while, and again we cannot put it on the front page or even in the papers unless there's something that has to support it. So this being revelations that are coming out now and taking us back to remind us what happened to these people.
You know, one thing which makes it very tricky even for editors is that the case is still ongoing. Only President Uhuru's case was, suspended for now. We don't know how the Ruto case will be decided. And if they say you need political support to win Ruto's case, so be it. But what about the justice that these people, the victims, deserve? There are so many people who still cannot even go back to their own tracts of land. And we have a government in place. What are they doing about it? I would be more interested in listening to those after ICC prayers saying, is there any Kenyan who was uprooted from his home, whether in Eldoret or in Naivasha or whichever part of the country, that needs to go back home? Come, we shall walk you there. Then they will be making a lot of sense. But these prayers in traditional shrines and making Christian and political statements, for me, is just, one way of diverting Kenyans from core issues.
All right. Okay, let's move on to something else, and I'd like us to look at an article that ran in the Saturday Nation, and it caused a lot of talk left, right, and center. And this is one written by one Njoki Chege, and it was to do with, I'll just read some of the excerpts, and I'm sure we'll be showing you some of the pointers there. For those who may not have read this particular article, it was called Fat Women Let's tackle this elephant in the room. Now, some of the statements that I'll just read some of them. I have been keenly following this plus-size debate, especially on social media. It is getting out of hand. Dear readers, these misguided fat women think that big is beautiful, and they even calling themselves authentic African women. That's just one of the statements. And then she continues to say, what nonsense. I don't know how many times I'm going to repeat this, but big is not beautiful. Okay, we have others there where she says you are a fat child because your mother overfed you and because you didn't move around enough to burn fat. I mean, she's gone on and on and on. Don't sit there with a bucket of ice cream and lie to us that you are stressed. You are just a glutton, a fat one. And there's more that continues. I don't know if you managed to read the article, but let me start with you, Mwenda Kilemi, and your take on this kind of article and it bordering on, is it truth, is it abusive, is it insensitive?
Well, according to statistics, 20% of women in Kenya are overweight or obese. So, and the fifth biggest killer is lifestyle causes such as obesity. So it is a serious issue, a very serious issue. But I think she relied too much on stereotypes of what we assume people who are overweight are. There are some genetic causes why people are overweight. I mean, the lifestyles we live today, people don't have time to work out as they did before. They go to work early in the morning, they leave late at night. And also poverty. Poverty is a big reason. You can't afford to buy good, nutritious food anymore. So I think she should have talked about those issues more than just assuming people just want to be overweight. She was relying too much on stereotypes. But it's also, I mean, she was trying to get a buzz on an article, so she would be bombastic with her language. Okay. Yeah.
Ohito, do you feel like it was a genuinely written article, or it was just one to cause debate, which it did? In which case, if that was the objective, it did definitely get the objective.
If Njoki Chege was my intern, so be it. And if she wanted to get attention from the audiences, I think she got as much as she did. Sometimes it forces editors and reporters to go out and hit very hard. The only problem I have with the article is the choice of words, foul language, and she starts by writing saying this is not the first time I'm doing this. I think if we were engaging the younger reporters like Njoki Chege in problem-solving journalism, she would have written a brilliant award-winning piece. But when the story only talks about fat women, you see what we call gender bias. What about fat men? I know enough of them in town and at home. And she should have brought them on board. If she went just ahead by prescribing what solutions these people work towards, that would be good. Not just by running. You can run and keep the same weight or even add more, because when you run out of energy. You know, this is a scientific thing. It revolves around metabolism. So she needed to do a little research, involve a few experts in her piece, and get voices of persons who are willing to share this personal problem of overweight or being obese with her, and then she would move the story to the next level.
But she could say her objective was mainly to, because from this article, it looks like it's not so much the health side of it, but the fact that let the women who are fat, according to her, not think they're beautiful. Let them not.
I will want to remind her that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. I have enough dozens of friends who like them big. So where she gets her statistics, which are also theories, also tells you on how the quality of our research and grounding on matters of weight is very poor. And I expected the editor, and her very good Saturday editors, Tim Wanyonyi, the managing editor, is a very good friend of mine, a very solid journalist, to have guided her story in the right direction. Unless they intended to just provoke those reactions.
I was looking at its article online this morning, and it has a lot of comments. So it did what it was supposed to do, as you said. It was supposed to create a buzz. I'm sure the editors knew that, to create a buzz. And the people who are commenting either support her, I mean full-heartedly, with
yes, because it was either side. There are those who said she's absolutely spot on.
Exactly.
There are those
who are completely offended by that comment, and her job was to do that. She's not a scientific journalist who's going to give us arguments why or why she should not do this. Her job was to get that argument.
Let's not run away from responsibility. As an editor, as a writer, you're writing to the public. Your language must not be foul. What happens when you have your daughters and sons reading the kind of foul language, you know, that is crap, you know, the some which I do not want to repeat on air, and you know, the manner in which the language was coached was foul. And if surely you write today to the Media Council, she will have to be someone to be told.
But she's not
down.
She's just expressing a personal opinion. It was a personal opinion piece.
It is a personal opinion, but I think we should be careful about elevating it to seem like it's a congent discussion about obesity. It is not.
Exactly. That's my point. That's my point.
This is what I might call click porn or clickbait. You know? She's writing it to cause controversy, but it's controversy for its own sake. It's not about sparking a debate.
It's not. Because she didn't put
it simply about causing a controversy so many people can come and read the article, you know, or visit her blog. You know, and the newspaper, I think, to its shame, runs it because it wants people to come and come to its pages, whether it's online or to buy the newspaper. You know, it's unfortunate. You know, I won't dwell on what she said and say I don't think it is worth the time. You know, but there is a discussion to be had, you know, about obesity, about its causes, etc. It is not to be had in the terms that Njogi Chege wrote. You know, in fact, that distracts from the debate itself, you know, and from the real issues that we should be talking about. You know, and in that sense, I think it's better we just sort of keep off.
Okay, now I'm moving away from that particular article, but talking about the principles and what should guide journalism, and you've talked about being offensive. Should it be allowed to even be on a paper when it is that abrasive, and yet not giving us any information? What really is the objective apart from just talking about it?
She was raising a very pertinent issue that concerns very many families and very many individuals. And there are so many Kenyans who are struggling with those lifestyle diseases and challenges of being overweight because of the nature of their jobs, perhaps because of the genes or the big bone syndrome, if you like. But in all fairness, the Media Council Act is very clear. We should not be using foul language in the first place. Two, we should be accurate, fair, and objective in all the articles as we deliver them. When you try to look at the content, I think some of these professional standards and ethics do not come through. And if you read the comments, those who are in the know pretty well were really saying, yes, you have an issue, but you would have delivered it better. You would have communicated in a more sober, problem-solving way than the way you did it. In the way you're trying to do it, I don't think you can help a single person who is overweight to overcome the challenge.
But the question we have to ask ourselves: is she a journalist? She's not a journalist. She's not a journalist, so she doesn't fall by those rules. She's just making an opinion, and we should take it as that, just as an opinion, an entertaining opinion, because it was supposed to be entertainment. On a serious note, the Ministry of Health does say that one of the biggest causes of problems in terms of health is lifestyle choices, and it affects women more than it affects men. But she was not trying to be factual. She was trying to get a laugh or get some booze or create interest in her brand, which she did.
Okay. So Gadara, it was just an article out there, and really should pay no attention to it in terms of giving us a solution.
Well, I don't think that when we talk about solutions, even about articulating the problems of this article helps in any in any way. You know, I think that our papers need to be a bit more discerning about what they choose to put on their pages, because these are editorial choices. Now, I'm not saying that she doesn't have the right to express her opinion or whatever, But there are choices. We've got limited media, we've got limited space in the paper, and I think editors are there for a reason. They're there to choose, to decide what is important, for people to know about, and they've got to be sensitive about how they tackle issues. It's not the first time we've seen articles, not just by her, but even by other journalists, for example, touching on women, suggestions that if women get degrees or PhDs, they can't get married.
Actually, interestingly, there is an article about PhDs,
women not being able to get houses.
I think you remember in The Nation there was some time back when a prominent psychiatrist was berating a woman, essentially for reporting or wanting to report a sexual assault, suggesting that she should investigate or look into her own motives for this, And this was run in a newspaper. These have real consequences and real effects, on people in terms of, we already know things like sexual crimes are severely underreported. When we run those papers, we've got to be, those sorts of articles, we've got to be aware of the consequences we have. This fat shaming that Njogi Chege essentially engaged in, is not helpful. It's not helpful to any debate. It doesn't propose any solutions. It doesn't even elucidate on what the actual problems are. So what is its value? And I think the editors really need to go back and ask.
There is a space for it.
That's the thing. What's the space for it? Should that be left maybe to social media rather than to run in?
There's a space in our media world for that, because clearly there's a response to it.
Well, so I really, again, just because there's a response to something does not necessarily mean it is worth
putting it there. Because, if say, for instance, you wrote an article that is tribal, you will get a response, but not a good response. Does that mean it should be there?
Her opinion is shared by many people. No matter how wrong we might find it, it's shared by many people. That's what was shown in the comments that were sent there. That's why the editor, I'm assuming, said he's going to publish it. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it accurate. I don't personally believe in it, but I do see where there's a space for it.
Okay. I think there are two things, and let me remind the good lecturer here that once you write in a registered, recognized platform like Nation Media, Standard, Star, or the People Daily, you must abide by the Media Act, and these are set ethical and professional standards that you must meet. And I would invite Njogi Chege, and I would challenge the Nation Media Group just to send her on a tour of West Africa, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Ghana, and she will stop talking about the size. Maybe her exposure level for me has faced some few challenges, and she needs just to take a walk around the continent, and she will see bigger, smarter, better women who are loved by their husbands, and stop the kind of partisan criticism that
we were talking earlier about the most popular website for news in the world is called Daily Mail, the Daily Mail website, and many of their stories don't adhere to journalism rules, yet they are the most popular website for news because they print things that people want to read, no matter how inaccurate, how offensive they may be. So there definitely is a space for this. There definitely is a space for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to take a short break. This is Morning Express. We are in the newsroom, and your comments are coming through via Twitter. I'll read a few of them as we get to the end of the show, so please keep them coming. The Twitter handle is at Michael G. Gitonga, and today we're looking at some of those stories that have made headlines. When we come back, I'd like us to look at the education crisis. There was a documentary that ran on NTV, and this I think was on Monday or Tuesday, and it was talking about the education crisis and how this has affected. Also, remember, there is the orgy of 12 to 18-year-olds that was reported in Eldoret, and could this be some effects of the teachers' strike that have begun to hit us quite early? Have we also looked at the long-term ripple effect of the teachers' strike? That's all coming up right here on Morning Express in the newsroom, so don't go away. Welcome back to the newsroom, and just in case you're joining us now, I'll just quickly introduce the panel that we have this morning. And we have Patrick Gadara, we have Mwenda Kileni and David Ohito, and we're looking at some of those stories that made headlines in the last week and how they were covered, and some of them maybe if there is more substance that is required to the story. Let's go to the education crisis that has hit the country. Just last week we had the 5-week stalemate sort of broken by what some have called Solomonic wisdom by the judge, and for them to go back to the negotiating table. But now, looking at a documentary that ran on NTV, which was talking about the education crisis in some marginalized areas of Kenya, where teachers have left. There are others who teach, they're not qualified teachers, but have taken up the burden. Let me start with you, Gadara, in terms of, as we were also looking at the education crisis and the strike, did we forget or miss that bit?
Well, I mean, kudos to NTV, I think, for highlighting what's happening, especially in the northeast, in the counties that are mostly affected by the Al-Shabaab menace. And we have had that running for a while. It has been reported that teachers are leaving. I think it was good for people to be able to see what the impacts of this exodus of teachers is. I'd have wanted much more concentration again on what should be done about it, what the government isn't doing. We remember that at one point they had put out statements that it is safe now, you can go back, but they're not going back, and the question is why. A lot of them are simply being redeployed by the same TSC that's saying that they should go back, So again, questions need to be asked of our administrators, of our people in government, but what's being sorted out. The second thing I would add is when we talk of education crisis, we've got to be aware there are many facets to our education problems. It's not just a strike or payment of teachers or insecurity. There is quality of education, which is a big issue. One of the things that really has been very little explored is the impact of FPE in our free primary education on our education system. The teachers have hinted about it, and the fact that they say they are overworked. There's absenteeism among teachers in schools, especially public schools. We're not looking at all this, and there's a wider picture, if you will, to be painted about this, that we won't solve our education simply by paying teachers better or by providing better security in northeastern things, while all this should be done, but they will not by themselves solve the problems. There are much wider, much deeper issues that we need to be looking at. I don't think the media is paying attention to.
All right. Mundaki, deeper cracks in the education system, other than just teachers not being paid and the issue that they had in court, which is still going on. Have we neglected that angle whereby the student, again, is the one bearing the brunt?
I think we have. I was talking to a teacher who has refused to go, yesterday, who has refused to go back to Garissa, and they've not been there since the beginning of the year. So they just said they're not going back to those sides.
Is it mainly because of insecurity?
Because of insecurity, because of a culture clash. They say they're not wanted in those places, they get insulted. There was a story about that a couple of months ago as well in the media. I think those issues are there, and the education sector in general is in a lot of crisis. We have a 90% attendance rate in primary school, but that drops to 40% and lower than 30% when you go to secondary school, depending on the statistics you use. So those are things that need to be looked at. Also, the issue of the strike, I mean, it's not really ended. Yeah, because what's going to happen after, because they really just retreated, so they would get there, they wouldn't get fired. So what's going to happen after 90 days? I mean, are they going to strike again? Unfortunately, we didn't get a finality to that issue, but I'd like that thing to just be done with so we can move on to other issues. Are we going to go through this crisis in a couple of months again? And also, I mean, we keep coming back to this, the amount of money spent in the education sector, we're not getting the results. The results are getting worse year by year. So, I mean, these are questions that really need to be asked. Okay.
David Ohito, in terms of what Kilemi says, there's a lot of money that is put into the education sector. Results seem to be getting worse. Teachers are sort of, or have resisted so far, performance contracts. Yet Jacob Kaimeni, the CS for Education, has been very vocal and saying we need to have a way of measuring. Have we as the media not maybe concentrated again on the child in terms of the quality of education that they're getting?
Yeah, I agree with Kilemi, and your assessment is pretty right that we really don't assess the quality of education. And this, in developed countries, this is a measurable thing. Today, I'm capable of sitting in several interviews from people who have graduated from school, from 3 universities, and when you talk to them, then you know there was a problem in the way they were learning, that even a graduate of English cannot express himself or herself in the same language she purports to be having a degree on. It's a big question mark. So we have a bigger problem that we need to start tackling as a society. 2, part of the problem is because teachers are underpaid. And I've been a strong advocate that however much investment we need to make in the education sector, we must pay the tutors or the teachers pretty well. If you pay a teacher the 16,000 shillings in Nairobi, where do you expect that teacher to stay? What do you expect him or her to spend on transport? What will he...
Although the 16,000 is basic, there is also allowances on top of that, which comes to, was it the 23,000 that the president was talking about?
Even put it at 30. You're living in Nairobi. You're teaching in Githurai. You live in Kibera. It still does not make economic sense. So we need to really address these questions properly. And that is why you see the private schools have taken advantage, because they know there's a very big problem in the Kenya's education sector, and they're thriving. And every other middle class person wants to take their children there and not to public schools.
I have to really say, it's not just middle class people. If you look at the statistics for the free primary education, since it was introduced, lots of poor people are taking out their kids away from what is free to where they pay.
To low-fee schools, yes.
Precisely.
Yeah, low-fee schools.
We have essentially rubbished our own public school system. This is one of the consequences of a poorly managed, poorly executed free primary school education policy. And because we don't go back and interrogate that, the politicians come and tell us free secondary school, and we export the same problems we had at primary school to secondary level. And now again we hear free university education. I'm not against free education per se. It is how it is implemented. And the problem is, and as has happened with almost all our education initiatives, going way back. And don't forget, FPE wasn't. This is not the first time we had it. We've tried it twice before, and it has failed. This is the 3rd time, and it is failing. And if we don't sit down and ask why is it failing, and fix those problems, all we'll keep doing is repeating the very same mistakes over and over. One other thing I'll add is, I think with the entire education thing, especially the teachers' strike, we need to be asking ourselves, it raises up very many fundamental issues. How it was adjudicated, the entire thing of the strike, I think leaves a really bad taste in the mouth. You've got the Court of Appeal essentially telling the government pay, and then a judge at a lower court suspending in effect this order for 90 days. How can a lower court suspend the order of a higher court? We're not asking these issues. And I think we need to go back, because the judiciary is going to be in the news for a bit to come. We've just had this issue again of them issuing orders against Parliament, which how that's going to be adjudicated is going to be quite interesting, or whether Parliament will actually comply, given that it has a history of not doing so. But we should be asking about the role of our judiciary, the role of our court orders, how it actually works, how the whole system is supposed to be to operate such that it safeguards the rights, not just, the rights of the citizens, especially when they are faced or when they go up against a government. I think some of the orders that have come out of the teacher strike, the inability or reluctance of the judiciary to enforce its own orders. Don't forget, it told the government, the TSC, that if you do not comply, your appeal will fail. It said this. They said this in open court.
The judiciary.
But now they're listening to both.
With that issue of education, from the beginning I've always argued the judiciary has been very incoherent in its arguments. One side says one thing, another level of judiciary says another. And as he says, a lot of these problems have been caused by the judiciary. And as we move along, we need to understand. They need to understand they can't make rulings in a vacuum. That there are consequences.
So the thing is, are we questioning those issues enough? Because we cannot say what they are to do or not to do, but we can definitely highlight What is not going right?
I think we need to highlight what we're talking about right now more. I mean, how do they, can we follow a theme? Do they have a theme in terms of rulings? Do they have a certain process? Do they have discussions among
them? Based on law?
Yes. I mean, how do they work these things? Because it's very hard to follow. One day you can have an appeal, one day you cannot. I mean, how do they work their systems? That's something we need to know.
Okay, David Ohito, in terms of bringing to light some of those things, especially now with the education sector, that may not have been dealt with properly.
Well, we have tried, but we're also caught up in the mix of trying to, package stories that may sell at the expense of going for, what's really factual, what's accurate, and what's problem solving here. You have the cabinet secretary saying is directing TSC to appeal the decision to hire 70,000 teachers, which throws in just a spanner in the works still. And what happens to the teachers they have? And what guarantee is there that even these they've had who are 70,000 will not go on strike the following day once they join the union? So, if you ask me, it's just confusion. The teachers may be back to classroom, but the problem has not been resolved. So, it's like a septic wound to receive karma.
All right, let's still keep with the education crisis and look at another story which ran yesterday and the day before, where 550 students were caught in a swoop, and they were in drugs, alcohol, and all sorts of things. Are these some of the ripple effects that we are experiencing because of the strike? This is just after the strike was called off when they were supposed to go back on Monday. Here is Sunday, and they're in a nightclub between 1 and 6 p.m. In terms of the story, David Ohito, and could this be one of the ripple effects that we should expect over time?
I would want to read it not as a teacher strike effect, but as a societal breakdown effect. That the speed at which our country is rolling its moral fabric, moral standing is very fast, and we must start addressing it. We have seen such things even when teachers are not on strike, so we cannot peg it on teachers.
It cannot be pegged on that.
The other day, the matatu that was caught somewhere, was it in Karatina? Or yes,
same thing.
Yes, and we failed to follow up that story. We don't know whether the people were charged and people were really held responsible. And that's why I agree with Gadara when he says we touch on the issue for 1-2 days and forget it for the rest of our time. We should really be investigating how could an owner of a club allow this to happen. 2, we've been having my good friend Mutudo making yapping noise all the time. Where was he and his officers? Is he just another talking shop, or do they have any muscle? Don't we have police officers? Is there not a county commissioner in that office, in that city? Is there not an education officer or even a children's rights officer who can say this is wrong? And you could see parents or adults saying we see this happening here every day, which means either those who are charged with responsibility have gone to sleep or we've just given up.
Okay,
I think I completely agree with him. The bigger issue for me also is that place is right next to the police station. So they can't really claim they didn't know what was going on over there for that long. And also, it's not the first place like that. I mean, I know of many pubs that are right next to police stations, or sometimes in the police station, that just flout all kinds of rules. So the enforcement of all these things, the rules are there, the enforcement is a problem. So why are they not being enforced?
So what role do we play in ensuring that happens, and especially given that, like you said, this is right opposite a police station? What does that say about our enforcers?
They are either being compromised or they're just not doing their job. I would really lean on the compromise aspect of it. And also, I mean, the most we can do as journalists is just highlight and force them to act. Now they've been forced to act.
Sure.
And hopefully we can talk about these issues, because it's a bigger issue. We have all seen how sometimes you see parents who take their kids to the bar. And there are rules against that, but they're so often flouted. Many pubs on Sundays you'll see the son is taken by the father. Let's go together, let's spend some time together with me at the bar. And there needs to be a discussion about that, because it happens quite often.
All right, Gadara?
I think there are two issues I would highlight. First is the coherence of the laws that we have. and whether they actually reflect the reality that is there, and whether they are enforceable. I think when it comes to drinking, especially among minors, I mean, there are some pretty strict rules about those. You should be asking them where is the enforcement element, of this. If we read some of the details in the story, were quite disturbing. That people's phones were taken away, the kids weren't allowed to make calls from inside, the place. That this is a regular thing. That they have a jam session, as they said, every Sunday afternoon. So questions about the access that kids have to these sorts of facilities, which is in essence illegal, shouldn't be allowed, but it happens right next to a police station, so we really need to ask about that. The second thing is about generally our education of our kids. We've had a situation where as a society we seem to reject the idea that kids should be taught about sex, about these things. We kind of like to bury our heads in the sand on these sorts of issues. I think that it's important we start asking, what is it that our kids should know? Because they're we were all young at some point. We did some pretty awful things. The world really hasn't changed that much. The youth will be youth. They will go out and experiment and stuff. The question is, are we equipping them for that, with the knowledge they need to have, with the tools they need to have? Whether it is how to handle peer pressure, the sorts of temptations that might come their way, whether it's sex education, etc. We seem to shy away from these things, to sort of say, if we don't say anything about it, then they won't know.
They won't know.
They're doing this. We know kids as young as 14, 15 are having sex.
They're actually from 12 to 18. Now, the interesting thing is also, as we are talking, I realize that we've left out the parents. We're talking about the police, we've talked about the teachers, we've talked about the owners of the club. Where is the parents?
They have abdicated their duties, and most of the parents, they try to be too busy for their families, trying to make a few coins so that they can go to maybe a private school, and that's it's the beginning of the problem. But the general breakdown of good examples in society. If you see what our politicians say in media, in public rallies, if you look at what our priests are doing, from, let me not mention names, but we expect our children to be angels. It's really difficult. So I think we're getting to that stage in society when we really need to look at ourselves and say, what should we do? When I was growing up at that age, I could be caned by a neighbor who necessarily, if I did wrong in public. Today, you try and do that, you find yourself in a lot of trouble.
So finally, before we finish with this particular one and go to something else, part of the things that were found on these children is alcohol that has been banned. The illicit brew that,
third generation brew.
Yes, the second generation brew. And of course that again puts a spotlight on the authorities, and the fact that, we went on and on and on about illicit brews and dropped the ball.
We didn't go on and on about illicit brews, and this has been my point for a long time.
When you say we didn't go on and on,
we didn't discuss the issues. We tended to conflate, and if you look at the reporting, it conflates very many separate issues. It suggests we've got an alcoholism crisis that we are now solving by setting up these rehab centers in places like Muranga, etc. When actually we don't have an alcoholism problem. Look at the statistics. It has not been evidence-based reporting at all about the issue of alcoholism. If you look at what we call illicit brews, lots of those illicit brews were licensed by the very same government. We sent in mobs into legitimate business enterprises to destroy them and assume that is a policy that's going to sort out the problem of counterfeiting. See, a lot of the problem with what we call illicit brew was counterfeiting and adulteration. what was actually done about those? You know, you do nothing about it. You make noise about something else, and then you act surprised that people can still procure, you know, counterfeit or adulterated drink. You know, so we didn't go on and on about it. We really got confused and distracted from what the real issues were, you know, and sat with and reported on the political, the shenanigans of political class leading mobs into businesses.
I think the issue here, as he's saying, is it was a knee-jerk reaction to a problem that people perceived to be there, and because they wanted to be seen in the right side of the issue, they went over the top. The bigger problem we have is enforcement of all these rules, be it with the doctor who was running a clinic that people did not know was even supposed to be licensed and wasn't. Yeah, be it the selling of alcohol by people who are not supposed to be selling, or be it the opening of clubs and running of clubs that are not supposed to be open at. I don't even know when they're supposed to be open at that time or sell alcohol at that time. They're all bodies that are supposed to be looking over all these issues, but they're not. So that's a bigger question. What's happening to the enforcement by the regulatory bodies?
Okay. All right. Finally, Ohito, the expose that was run on the Standard the other day on the state of child abuse within families. Your take on that?
Really a good break from our usually over political news pages, and gave us a lot of reaction online and a lot of traction also. But it tells you again the breakdown in the moral fabric that I've been talking about all morning. You know, it's becoming bad, but these are offenses we should be really be taking people to court to really, you know, be held accountable. But the rate at which it is happening, because you can imagine when it's being done at family level, it's really a very demeaning and really worrying situation. We don't know whether to start doing an audit of every other family and asking every child or parent, has this ever happened to you? But it calls for a lot of caution. I think we need to expose many members of the family to ways of detecting signs early enough so that we can try and save our children. I'm really a strong advocate for children, and they should not be abused. They must be protected.
Very briefly, Kilemi, on the article, and
I think it's also a sign of frustration in the population. Usually when you see abuse happening in families, it's usually frustration of our professional lives or our lives outside of the home. So we need to look at what's happening with, as we develop as a continent, as a nation, what's happening with family values, as he's saying, and how that's being affected by longer work hours, more stressful work conditions, and how that's affecting the home.
all right, Gadara?
I think that when it comes to the issue of abuse of children, I think we need to be aware that much of this historically has happened within the family, you know, much of this abuse, you know, so it is not new that it's happening in the family. The question is, the fact is we're becoming more aware of it. The question is, what do we do about it? One of the things I think that we keep shying away from is educating our own kids to know what is appropriate, what isn't. You know, I don't think this just like the issue with sex and alcohol and stuff, are societal problems. We cannot simply say it is up to parents or up to the family to educate its own kids or to protect its own kids. These are societal issues. And as a society, we should be putting in measures to ensure that where there is a breakdown, we are mitigating it. And I'm a big advocate of ensuring that you've got these sorts of education in school, where kids go and they learn about their body parts, what are their rights, what cannot happen, what's inappropriate.
I'm told by the director time is really up, but thank you very much, gentlemen. Patrick Gadara, who's a communications expert. We have Mwenda Kilemi, who's a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. David Ohito, who is a digital editor with the Standard Media Group. Thank you so very much. Also, your comments coming through. KB Eliud says about students arrested in the swoop, it doesn't end with the police. The community isn't playing their role. We have somebody else who says that when when you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, and that's, I think, regarding the teachers' strike, and we're talking about the quality of education. I think Joki Chege is a sensational journalist. I agree with Gadara. She is not worth the discussion. That's from Kendrick Jamal. Well, that's where we're going to wind up Morning Express this morning. Do stand by. We've got the news and bulletin coming up in the news hour in just a short while. Thank you for joining us. Good morning. My name is Michael Gitonga.